often say that Mount Everest is the mountain people love to hate. And I don't know why it brings out the critics like it does.
It's great to be able to summit, but main thing is to come back alive, to come back healthy.
If you're enjoying the show and want to take the next step in your training, join our newsletter and receive a free 4-week sample training plan. Head on over to uphillathlete.com/letsgo, and once you sign up, you'll instantly get a link to try out some of our most popular training plans. It's a great way to get a feel for how we train our athletes for big mountain goals. Check it out at uphillathlete.com/letsgo. That's uphillathlete.com/LETSGO. Welcome to the Uphill Athlete podcast. My name is Steve House. I'll be your host today, and I have two wonderful guests. Our very own coach, Martin Zhor. Welcome, Martin.
Hi, Steve. Thank you.
And everyone's favorite Everest commentator, Alan Arnette. Welcome, Alan. Really good to have you here again.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to start off just by hearing from you, Alan. What were the highlights of the 2025 Everest season or even Himalayan season? What sticks out? What is 2025 the year of, if we look back?
Yeah, I always try to come up with a few keywords rather than a sermon. But I think the keywords for this year have to include wind, drones, and AIDS. It was very windy all across the Himalaya. And it was also a strange year starting off with Annapurna. The winter, first off, was unusually dry and not a lot of moisture. So that made climbing on Annapurna just a crazy rock fall all over the place. They didn't even use crampons or climbing boots to go from base camp to Camp 1. And of course, then the season ended tragically with two Sherpas dying from an avalanche of all things, because they got a bunch of snow towards the end of it that ended the season early. Drones, they experimented with it on Everest last year. They've been doing it on the Tibet side for a couple of years earlier. But this year, they really used it with full force. And we can talk about that, what detail they did, mainly around the ice fall and helping remove trash, which the SPCC did a great job. And then AIDS, we saw this novel use of the Nobel gas Xenon that allegedly allowed the team to do a week to week. But then we had another person that went from New York that claimed he did it in under 4 days, and he didn't use Xenon, but he did use. They both, all of them, use hypoxic tents. So it was an interesting year. The last piece of it, Steve and Martin, is that I think this year was a pretty good year relative to the weather windows. Yeah. And, but what was the unreported story was all the frostbite. And I'll get off on a rant on frostbite because I think in 2025 that it is totally avoidable. And I don't understand how people get frostbite, but there was Global Rescue reported over 130 rescues just by their company in April and May. So it was a normal, tough season. I think that if you want to have a headline, maybe it's that Everest is still damn hard to climb.
Yeah. Yeah, and the environment can be very severe. Martin, how did your athletes that you have been coaching and over the last 12 months, how did they do? How did everyone end up?
Yeah, so I had quite a big group of clients. I was preparing for Everest this season. So it was about 10 people directly, 10 athletes directly, and let's say like 20 more or less indirectly, like a group coaching. So quite a big group, let's say, more than last year. So I learned a lot for sure. I would say 90% of them summited. There was a couple of them that just didn't succeed for different reasons. A lot of sickness, a lot of respiratory infections. That took many people had those issues, not around the summit days, just like 3-4 weeks before, but it still has an effect. I mean, what I see on Everest is just the base camp is so high that it's really hard to recover from anything. So that is the main issue there, I think. And so they still felt kind of the loss of power, the loss of capacity when the summit days came. And I guess also the unpredictability of the weather, that was a big issue. But yeah, I'm actually relatively happy with the results and how they made how they succeeded and how they showed up, I guess. And it doesn't need to be always summiting. Of course, it's great to be able to summit, but main thing is to come back alive, to come back healthy. And well, one of them, he actually described the experience during the summit day. So he had to turn around at around 8,400 meters. I think it's like the close to the balcony or somewhere up there. And I'm really proud. I was really proud of him, the decision he made, because just he felt I probably wouldn't have the capacity to come back down on my own. I would have to be helped, and I really wanted to avoid that. And other people in the group, they carried on, and they actually had to be kind of dragged down and heli rescued from Camp 2. So were the cases. That was the feedback I was hearing a lot. I guess the people, it's still a big climb. It's a tough climb, and complex, and yeah, it's not only getting to the summit but also getting back down to in one piece, and with having enough strength. That takes a lot of self knowledge, and so most of my athletes, we've worked together for like 1 year. So that's for me an ideal. Well, it's not ideal. The longer, the better, I guess. But the shorter it is, the 6 months to go. It's a limit. It's only certain kind of adaptations that you can achieve, and I prefer if athletes address or ask us for coaching earlier than that.
Yeah, and I can corroborate that difficulty in going down from my own time climbing there. I attempted the south face of Nuptse many years ago, and at one point we wanted to go down and recover, and it was a long ways to get down under 3,500 meters, something like that. It's really hard to do that. Of course, if you have the coin for the heli ride, that's another issue that money may solve that problem if that's an option for you. But that's a real thing. Alan, you mentioned something I didn't expect you to bring up, which was the drones. Like, how have these been getting implemented?
Yeah, so I'm a little mixed on these drones because this one drone that they used is made by a Chinese company called Drone Technology, and the model is the DJI Flycart 30, and it costs $70,000, and they have a payload of 30 kilos or 66 pounds, and so what they did, they used it first off to scout the icefall for the icefall doctors. So rather than having the icefall doctors go in and try to figure out what the optimum route is, they just flew over it with the cameras and they were able to look at the video. And so then secondly, they used it to carry ladders, rope, pitons, ice axe, all the stuff you used to do the fixed rope. And they took it to Camp 1. They didn't go. They went up to what the maximum altitude was, a crazy 6,130 meters. So about, almost 19,000 feet roughly. And that's the highest that a documented drone has ever delivered anything. But what the nice part about it was that not only did they take gear up, so that removed the opportunity for the Sherpas to have to carry it through the icefall. And that's was a time saver and potentially a lifesaver. But more importantly, in my mind, was they were able to bring trash down. And so they brought it down, with around 30 pounds to 15 kilos each time from Camp 1 back down to base camp, where then it was, in theory, ethically, processed and all. But some of the numbers that the SPCC quoted this year based upon using the drones is they removed 83 tons of garbage. And of that, and this is an amazing number, was almost 32,000 kilos of human feces.
Wow. Okay.
Now, most of that was because they've now finally have implemented using wag bags. And so most of that were climbers. And I had 2 clients through Summit Coach on the north side and 2 on the south side. And they all 4 reported that some climbed with Western companies, some climbed with Nepali companies, but all of them were using WAG bags.
Okay, great.
So, all in all, I think the use of drones, and where I get a little conflicted is that I had one friend, he wasn't a client, a friend, Paul Adler said, it's not around all the time. There are drones flying over my head all the time, like mosquitoes. And so I can imagine that would be pretty annoying being there. I've heard people before talk about Everest Base Camp on the Nepal side being an airport with all the helicopters coming in and out. And now it's a mosquito swarm with all these drones flying around. One of them got hit by high winds. And I guess when you pay $70,000 for a drone, this should not be a surprise, but it got hit by the winds, knocked some of the rotors out, and it deployed a parachute. And the parachute allowed it to have a relatively soft landing, but it fell into a crevasse and was damaged. I never did hear if they reused it or not. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a development I wasn't really unaware of. And I can see, like with a lot of these, developments, there's pros and cons, right? I mean, obviously, like there's improved safety for the Sherpa that are having to take a lot of trips to the ice fall, which is the most dangerous part of the climb. They're removing a lot of waste, which obviously is a positive, but there's also, it's a different place now, right? Like you're not going to be basking in the silence of the incredible Western Coombe up there that climbers were 30, 40, 50 years ago. So
it's no longer the Valley of Silence. Now it's the Valley of Drones.
Valley of Drones.
I guess at least it sounds it was 6,100. So that's maybe Camp 1. Guys, Camp 2 is 6,400. So I guess upper parts were without the noise. But I think it should be more positive than negative. Because I live in Chamonix. And here we get a lot of complaints. People complain about helicopters. There is just not non-stop helis where it's the rescues, which kind of gives you a reality check of how many accidents there are in the season. It's just non-stop. I look in Chamonix now out of the window, and always you just get used to it. I've been here for 15 years, but also when you climb in Joras or Jurasis, and in the range of Mont Blanc, there is always a heli around, and it's really resonating between the walls of the valleys. And people they tend to say, "Well, like it's the noise pollution is crazy," and they try to limit this. Mostly, then it's the panoramic flights, the commercial flights, taking people around, and then it's like 3-4 different companies operating in the range, I think. So, yeah, I can kind of imagine what they are dealing with. And also, I was in Khumbu last time I was there was last year with my wife, just running through Khumbu and towards Island Peak. And you notice there's nonstop heli flights back and forth. So, yeah, it's just the reality.
In theory, the Nepal government banned any helicopter flight other than for a medical rescue. But again, this year, Steve, to your point about how it's really changed, is that a lot of people, not a lot, but there were many cases of people that used a helicopter to fly out from Camp 2 after summiting. Yeah. And I don't think Elizabeth Hawley, rest in peace, would approve that.
Yeah. Yeah. That, these changes, are with us. One of the things that really struck me, Alan, when we were chatting earlier was the sheer number of climbers climbing. And some of these expedition organizers had an excess of 100 people looking to punch their Everest ticket under one expedition, and many in that range of 80 to 100 U.S. and Nepali outfitters both. What is driving this kind of never-ending or ever-increasing curiosity around Everest and wanting to climb it?
I've said this phrase for years that Everest is a bright light to a lot of bugs. And they may know that it's going to be a one-way trip, but the bug is going to fly into the light anyway. But the real impetus and inflection point happened around 2013, so over a decade ago, and it's just grown from then. And that was the advent of the Nepali companies led by Seven Summits Treks, really competing on price. They cut out the Western guide. So that meant that now you don't have to pay that salary of whatever that is, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, that person's airplane flight, that person's permit. Because, if you're a Westerner, it doesn't matter if you're a guide or a client, you still got to pay the 11. Now it's going to be 15,000. So they basically, they turned the entire industry upside down through a business model by having a lower cost structure. They were then able to, instead of charging 65,000, they charged 35,000. And that brought in an entirely new demographic, primarily the emerging middle class in India and in China. And again, this is a decades-old trend, and that's why this year in 2025, the leading country was from India, and I think they had 89 permits, followed by the U.S. at 83. But Seven Summits Treks had 103, 8K Expeditions had over 50, and the ratio of client to support this year was 1 to 1.6. So in other words, almost 1.5 Sherpas for every client. So that meant that Seven Summits Treks had somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 Sherpas supporting those 100 clients. That's a lot of people.
On the mountain, right? Like those are just climbers on the mountain. Those are not support staff supporting all of those people.
That doesn't include cooks and porters and cook boys and all that. No.
Yeah, I mean, a small anecdote. In 1999, I did an expedition to Gasherbrum 4 in the Karakoram, and when we started with 99 porters, and each day we sent home 4, because that was how many, and that's 25 loads each. So we were burning through 100 kilos of kerosene, rice, flour, just supplies every day. So when we arrived in base camp 7 days later, we had, whatever the number was, it was 70 or something porters. And that was the actual stuff, and because we were all eating so much, and it's sort of this, when you start calculating the weight of food for one human 24 hours a day for a 7 to 10 day trek, and we're hungry and we need snacks and tea and coffee and all the things, it just snowballs and you get into these huge numbers. So, you cited some impressive sort of waste generation numbers or math, the amount of waste that came out of there. And frankly, it's not that surprising to me because, it just takes a lot to fuel that many people and working hard, right? Like they're not just like couch surfing up there. They're working hard.
Yeah. And also another thing that's happening is that especially the Western companies, and now the Nepali companies are starting to do this, they're marketing their fantastic food. I mean, there's one company in particular, I won't mention their name, but it doesn't matter what's going on the mountain. In every dispatch or every comment, it says, and today's meals were delicious. And so this year, and this has been happening the last 4 or 5 years, but foreign companies have been bringing in like European or Australian chefs, so the luxury levels going up. So now you're going to have, sushi and, some type of really nice sauce on your dalbot. So it's over the top.
Yeah, that is. So, one of the things that seems to stand out for me is the advent, at least publicly, of using the noble gas Xenon as a purported aid to help with, we're not sure if it's acclimatization or if it's protective, organ protection or what. And another very interesting sort of natural experiment, if you will, with an individual who, as you pointed out, climbed Everest in 4 days round trip from New York using pre-acclimatization and, of course, supplemental oxygen. When did you first hear about this, Alan? What was your initial, not your current, I'm curious what your initial response was, and because for a lot of people, they'll be hearing about this the first time. And the three of us have already talked and thought and written about this extensively. So I'm curious about your initial reaction to this idea.
Yeah, I originally got introduced to it by the reporter in the Financial Times. Mm-hmm. Initially broke the story. He contacted me in either late December or early January, kind of on a deep background and a promise that I wouldn't talk about it until he printed the story thing. So the marketing around this was top notch, even though later on there was a lot of misinformation that the Xenon team claimed was out there. But That's a great question, Steve. My initial reaction versus my current reaction. Once I heard that it's really used, it'd been used in Russia for decades as anesthesia, I was like, what? And then as I began to understand more that it's very safe with anesthesia. You and Dr. Peter Hackett has had an outstanding podcast on this a few months ago, or I guess whatever, a couple months ago, and Dr. Hackett really did a great job of explaining how safe Xenon is under medical supervision in an operating room.
Yeah.
And the other thing that people I think conflate is that they didn't use Xenon on the mountain. Yeah. They had a 30-minute exposure to it under a doctor's supervision in Germany, wasn't even in Nepal. So, and what happened was that Xenon then stimulated the bone marrow to create more red blood cells and, in theory, allowed them to acclimatize quicker. But here's the factor that strikes me is that these four guys that from the UK, they were all ex-military UK special forces. These guys are the fittest of the fittest. I know we're going to talk about physical training and preparation, and these guys trained for a year. So these guys were in fantastic shape. That's number one. Number two, they spent 500 hours, 62 nights in a hypoxic tent. And they were with Fruitenbach Adventures, and he, along with Adrian Bollinger, are probably the best of understanding how to use this hypoxico approach. And they have formulas, they've got doctors, they absolutely hold their clients' hands. And so they go in, acclimatize probably to 23,000 feet, 7,000 meters. And then third is that Lucas didn't disclose how much supplemental oxygen they used, but he's told me in the past that he's modified his regulators to go up to 8. Now, again, Dr. Hackett will say that anything over 4 is really not useful, but nonetheless, it could be a psychological thing. So, and the guy from Andrew from New York, he acclimatized 500 hours, and he used supplemental oxygen from base camp, which is unheard of, to the summit, also at an undisclosed flow rate. So there's a lot of things that we don't know. So to single out that Xenon was the magic formula, I don't think there's enough data there. And I understand that especially Lucas would disagree with that assessment because he's done it. He's used it himself personally. And he said he never felt better in the world. And I am not going to discount what that man says. He's got a lot of experience. He's a very credible person. So, but for me, I originally was aghast. Now I have a completely different opinion of it, but I'm going to stop there.
Martin, what was your initial reaction?
Well, it's a tough one, but I think maybe as an athlete, because let's say I put an athlete hat on, of course, I was a bit skeptical about using Xenon, and I heard about Xenon first in the Sochi Olympics 2014, when it, I think, actually came out first time because it was used by the Russian athletes back then. And actually, I think what's interesting to mention about Xenon, I guess Pete Hackett, I agree, it was a great podcast that you, Steve, did with him. He explained it really well, but it's noble gas. It doesn't bind to organic molecules, and we are made of organic molecules pretty much, which is an interesting thing there, and that's why it's great. It's being used in a medicine because, well, that is the issue with many medicaments and I guess different medical protocols where you have the side effects, and here with Xenon that is not happening. That's where it's really interesting. I guess the effects, what it actually does, that is the big question mark, and the research is really lacking there. And I guess why it's lacking is because it's too expensive. At least what I understood about it. I tried to read a lot up on it because I wanted to really understand it. And I guess I put now the scientist hat on, which I'm studying altitude physiology currently in a master program in Östersund University. So, I definitely am interested in this. What is actually happening? And so I guess that is still non-conclusive. We just don't really have enough data and enough research. And I guess that's where there was a lot of this response internationally in different media outlets and different journals, and also, coming from all sorts of directions. And I guess rightly so. We want to understand And I guess, yeah, we will not know from this. We just don't know what was the effect of Xenon and what was the effect of the supplemental oxygen. But to be fair, I do think that it did something. I don't really think that it was the hematological part. Like the red blood cell production takes time, and so again, we just don't know exactly when that happened, the inhalation. But what I know about the timeline of red blood cell production, erythropoiesis, and all that, it takes days and weeks. And so it sounds more like that the other effects of Xenon were more powerful, which is like the neuroprotection and protection of tissue. So quite interesting, but it needs to be confirmed, I guess, by further research.
Yeah. And I would say that there is data out there. It's just that only one person has access to it. I mean, there's, Lucas will say there's been over 20 plus ascents of Everest. So, this is my recollection using Xenon in some format. So, but he has access to all that data. Nobody else does. It's his proprietary thing. He took the risk. He innovated on it. We may find out someday, and frankly, we may not. I mean, or we may not in our lifetime. It may be beyond that. I want to just chime in with my sort of first impression, which was, I think, not what people expected from me. I'm known as perhaps the purist, the pure alpine style. Like, in my own climbing career, I never used supplemental oxygen or medicines or drugs or shortcuts of any kind. My approach was always, to focus on the process of the experience. That's what I was there for. That's what I was going for. That's what I was engaged in. So for me, it didn't make sense. It was actually completely counterproductive to try to quote unquote shortcut that process. That said, that's all I did at that time in my life. I had no kids. I had no other career as a professional climber. I was sleeping and drinking, climbing all the time. So I had that luxury, right? And that is a luxury, I have to admit. And not everyone has unlimited time and can approach things in that way, as altruistic as that may be. So part of me was honestly like, hey, this is great. If this cuts down the time that people need to climb Everest from 3 weeks to 5 days, this is just a huge win because, people won't be on the mountain as long. It'll be safer. There'll be less waste. There'll be less human impact. There'll be less environmental impact. I was thinking really almost immediately along those terms. And I was also like, well, what difference does it make? People are already, using everything they can. I mean, that's human nature. We a lot of this conversation so far has been around technology. We're going to use whatever technology we get. And, if it's supplemental oxygen, we use that. If it's dexamethasone, many people will use that. If it's, another noble gas, people will use that. And I think in a way, one of the things that I take away from this as that I'm really grateful for, in the sense that I'm really grateful, and you put it well, that Alan, that Everest is this bright light, and there's a lot of moths, a lot of insects will fly towards that light. And I have no problem with that because I've been to the Himalaya and I've climbed other peaks and I know just how many mountains there are and how many, so in a way it's like, okay, let's concentrate all the people that want to do that. And I'm perfectly happy to support those people however I can to do that. And it essentially makes everything safer, less human risk. And it keeps people that are doing on that kind of 7 summits track focused on that. And, the rest of the mountains are wide open for those that want to explore in that vein. So I almost think that we need to come up with a different term. I'm going to propose that we, come up with, I don't know what this term is, but is this mountaineering? Do we need new terminology for climbing mountains, using technology, using drones, oxygen, Xenon, versus climbing mountains entirely for the process? Or do we have that term as one alpinism and one mountaineering? I don't know. Like that's what I think. Are we ever going to make that distinction in the public eye? Probably not. But that's okay. So those are that was my whole thought process in all of this.
It's interesting here in Colorado. We have 58 mountains that are higher than 14,000 feet or 4,000 meters roughly. And there's a really popular website called 14ers.com. And it's about 50-50 between when people say, I climbed Mount Elbert versus I hiked Mount Elbert. And, and the term alpinist is really more prevalent in Europe. You don't see it as often in the U.S. But in my mind, when I see someone that calls themselves an alpinist, I think, okay, they climb an alpine style. It's not, siege mountaineering. They don't use supplemental oxygen. Chances are they don't have any support. They're with a couple of friends, and they're just, they're truly climbing the mountain, and they're not, and they're challenging themselves against the mountain. Whereas mountaineering, I think, is that broader coverage of what we see in modern climbing today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, Steve, over the last 6 months now, I've really spent too much time thinking about this stuff, about the Xenon. And I finally have come to a spot where, frankly, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. And because I am not physically gifted like you are to be able to climb a mountain like Everest or K2 without using supplemental oxygen. I struggle. It hurts. I suffer every time I went out. And for me, that was part of the experience. And I think flying from Denver to Kathmandu, helicoptering to base camp, running up, running down, returning home as fast as I can to get back to my life, I think that misses the whole point. And this is my personal opinion, that I think expedition mountaineering is something that is a point where you suffer. You do challenge yourself against a mountain. You do figure out who you are. And it removes, I've said this many times, it removes any veneer of pretense about who do we think we are. And all of a sudden you see who you are, your goods and your bads, your faults. And if you're honest with yourself and you allow that process to change you, you will come home a different person. Martin, you coached Eva, 64 years old, oldest American woman to summit Everest. I could be wrong on that. But
I think she actually there was another American woman later, just after. So she held the record for a day or two.
She held it for 24 hours. So still less than
something. Still amazing.
Like me, I held the oldest for American for 10 years. And I think there was a lady who just surpassed me last year. Nonetheless, I digress. But I think if you go through that process, then you come home a better version of yourself. And if you're a better version of yourself, then tell me what the downside was of spending 4 weeks versus 4 days. And I'm not sure if you rush it that you really get the full experience. I like sleeping on the ground. I like crawling out of the tent on my hands and knees. I don't want to sleep in a box tent on a cot with a down duvet. I don't mind eating dalbot. Actually, that's not true. But, I enjoy the expedition life. I enjoy the camaraderie of my teammates and on and on. So that's where I am today. And with respect to Xenon, if that's for you, if it's helium, if you want to go up in a spacesuit, knock yourself out. I'm not going to judge you. And if it works for you, good on you. But I'm not a fan.
If I may add something, so I think I agree with that. I think it was quite a kind of triggering topic in the recent months, and it took a while to maybe come with some kind of understanding of the situation. I think maybe personally, what I noticed is that I guess the difference is that people pay a lot of money, and I understand that they really want to make it to the summit, and it's being sold as that. We will get you there. So I think then where do we draw the line? I think we crossed that line already many times, right? So I grew up as a kid reading about Reinhold Messner and then Steve, the style of climbing, and coming from Eastern Europe, the mentality is very strong there, the purist style. But now I'm here and I'm nobody to judge people how they want to choose to climb. I think maybe just the thing about safety that was mentioned a lot as like we will guarantee it will guarantee the safety. I think for me, it's that there needs to be the space to also turn around and go home, to just accept that the mountain is too strong for me, or I'm not strong enough, just to be able to accept that rather than forcing it. So maybe that's what I wanted to mention. And again, everybody needs to find that for themselves, I think.
Yeah.
For me, and I remember Steve telling me 2 years ago, I was going to Pakistan myself to try Broad Peak. And I came without the summit. I came home. I just couldn't for different reasons. But he told me in the last years of your career, I think it was more times you didn't succeed. You didn't summit than you did. And then actually, that's what I just said. Is it the success or lack of success? How do we define success? Is it the summit, or is it actually the experience to try to get there? So, yeah, just wanted to.
With my summit coach clients, I always tell them this in the first call, like within the first 10 minutes, is that in my mind, success is having a positive experience and coming home with all your fingers and toes back to your family and your dog. It's a positive experience. There's many reasons why we don't summit, some within our control, most out of our control. And most of it is just comes down to simple preparation, people waiting too late. And I think we're going to get into that. But they don't they commit, and I've said this often, they commit the greatest sin that a climber can commit, and that's the sin of arrogance, that you overestimate your capacity and you underestimate how difficult it is to climb at altitude. I committed that sin 3 times on my first 3 attempts on Everest before I finally woke up and realized that I have completely thought way too big of myself. And so I had to double down on my preparation, and I had to go into the mountain with much more humility and much more respect and much more dedication to preparation.
Yeah, I think that's great from both of you. I love to hear this. I mean, my friend Marco Prezel and I used to always joke about, well, let me tell the story. We were coming down from walking out after not climbing this peak in the Peruvian Andes, and we had epicked pretty hard, and we were pretty exhausted, and we were just sort of cows to the barn. We probably just stopped and eaten and slept and all those things, but we just wanted to get to the valley and get to some ceviche and a beer, and and we were pretty ragged, and we're going down in the trail, super dusty, and it's super hot, and this guy sees us and sees we're climbers. He's walking up, and he's all clean. You can still smell the perfumes in his shampoo or whatever, and it just hits you like a wall. And he just gives us this big smiley face, and he's like, "Yes." And we knew what he meant. He meant, did we summit? And we looked like that walked over it, and Marco just laughed at him, and he just looked at him, laughed like, ha ha ha, yes, our success. And then he just kept going, and we didn't really think about it that much until later. We're like, yeah, what is success? Like, why was that funny to us? And of course, to us, we were also a little angry and upset that we didn't do what we wanted to do, and we failed. But at the same time, we get back, you start talking about it, you learn from it, and and then we went on and did 3 more successful climbs that season, partly because we had failed, quote unquote, and learned some things that were key that we were able to then apply to actually get up some climbs. And we used to joke about that throughout our partnership about what is success. It was our standing gag about this. And I think it's a very important, serious question, right? And when we talk about it on the Voice of the Mountain series in depth, but also with our athletes one-on-one all the time, because, it's important to define that for yourself and what that means for you. And I think one of the things that was so interesting for me watching the whole Xenon debate unfold was how judgmental people are, and they were and still are in many cases, I believe, and what that says about the people judging more than what it says about the people trying new things and innovating and changing and maybe doing things that people don't like, but they don't care if people don't like it. And I think that dynamic is super interesting too. For Lucas, I think success is actually being an innovator. I think he loves being a disruptor. That's his happy place, right? He loves mixing it up. He loves trying things. He loves thinking outside the box. And those people aren't always popular, but they also try stuff and and have a thick skin and are able to push things forward. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 3 steps back. That's the nature of progress. And I think that has all been super interesting, that's been brought up by this whole controversy.
My favorite part was actually the last couple of weeks when my athletes came back, and just hearing from them. I gave them a bit of time because that's already what I learned. You need time to process and decompress, and just hearing their stories, whether it was, again, they didn't summit or they did summit. And so actually then I just thought about it when we were talking about the topic of success and defining it. So funny, I climbed Manaslu, my first 8,000 meter peak, and my lifelong dream since I was a kid. I dreamed about that in a style that I wanted to. So 1 push from the base camp without oxygen, and that was in September last year. So funny, I actually realized that later that I had more of a burnout after the success summit than after not succeeding on Broad Peak 2 years ago. I just felt hollow. Like, without, what am I doing now? Like, what now? Because I dreamt about it for so long, for so many years, and now I did it. So now, what now? And I think I'm totally fine with that. I already know I've had some burnouts before, so that is actually an experience, and I learned so much from that. But it's still, an interesting when you realize, okay. I think what matters is how you show up and what you invest, and you choose your own style.
I think that I wrote a little essay a few years ago called "The Climber's Depression," and I attached it to the end of this season's summary. And it is a kind of a humorous, satirical piece, but basically it goes through three scenarios for a climber: that you summited, you didn't summit, and it was somebody else's fault; you didn't summit, and it was your fault. And kind of the refrain here is that you get back home and people are all excited to hear your story. But then as soon as you start talking and going into detail, they're like, oh, that's great. Hey, so what's next? And then you go into the abyss of what's next. And there's this depression. And I've been on 38 major expeditions, and not one of them did I come back home after a couple of weeks going, gee, why am I so down? And it didn't matter the result. Just exactly what you said, Martin. You go to Manaslu from base camp to the summit, no O's. My gosh, 1 push. That's incredible. But you came home and you didn't feel elated? Totally.
I did, but it was kind of maybe later. It was just that, okay, what now? Like, what am I going to do now? So
I've talked to people that run marathons or Ironman or whatever, and and anybody that has these really big, massive goals that they set, and once they complete it, the psychological side of it just begins to take the toll rather than the physical side once you get home.
Yeah, famously Olympic athletes, right? It's only every 4 years. Yeah. And you run 10 seconds or one jump, and interesting.
There's a lovely Jim Carrey line about him saying he wishes everybody could be successful so they'd realize that it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
Ooh, I like that.
And I'm just paraphrasing. Of course, he said it in a much funnier, wittier, more memorable way. But it's not limited to mountaineering. It's not limited to alpinism or climbing or ultra running. It's, I think, any kind of achievement-oriented direction that we put our hearts and souls and time and money and everything into. They have these effects. But the important thing, as I long maintain, is just doing the hard thing. It's just important to go to do hard things because that interest you, that catch your interest, because that's life, that's growth, that's progress, and it doesn't always look like progress, but it is.
It's the Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's classic, right? 100%. I love that. So, there was quite a bit of blowback, as we've alluded, to the idea of using Xenon. Some of the places it came from were, trying to sound helpful, but I think we're, by this I mean hey, this is not approved for this application. Well, okay, bottled oxygen also isn't approved for, climbing to high altitude. People, there's never, there's lots of these things. So I think that there's some of this blowback, some of this feedback has been categorically kind of not constructive. And that bothers me. Like I would like to see us as a community be skeptical. I think we have every right, as you both pointed out, to be skeptical about what works. That's the scientific process, right? Like if you can run an experiment and you can get a result, you should give me the same conditions so I can run the experiment and verify independently that result does come out of these methodologies. And so, we are in a place right now where we're talking about commercial interests and proprietary knowledge. So therefore, I have to say, I would hypothesize that, there's more than one anesthesiologist in the world. And I would hypothesize that there's some very good doctors in places like India who are, going to try to figure this out. This is not going to be the exclusive domain of Fortenbach Adventures for very long, I would argue. And then we will start to get some other data, whether or not that's public data. I suspect it won't be, but at least it will be additional data points in the sort of evolving natural experiment that is Mount Everest. What do you think is the logical next step, Alan? What happens now?
Well, Lucas, to his credit, a couple of things to his credit. Number one is he does not think this is going to become a standard for a couple of reasons. One is he charged, I think it was $153,000 because xenon gas is very expensive. And if you're going to do it, he did it, I guess, the way you're supposed to do it, under tight medical supervision. So he doesn't think it's going to become the new standard. Maybe cutting it to 3 weeks, like what Adrian does, that'll become, you're seeing more and more people like Garrett Madison offering and Mike Hamill offering, these rapid ascents and stuff. I think that might become the new standard. It won't be 2 months now, it'll be 3 weeks. But the biggest thing that I'm concerned about, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, is the unintended consequences. That because of what we talked about earlier with this, people let, bugs to a light and stuff. And, I think it's wonderful that we have so many people interested in high altitude mountaineering, and especially younger people. That's going to keep the sport alive and growing, along with the technology, the progress, the advances, the innovation. All that's goodness. Yeah. The dark side of that is that people will see, oh, well, this guy did it in 3 weeks. He did 3 days. This guy, 4 guys did it in a week. I can too, because I don't have the time to take off from my work. So they're going to somehow or another figure out how to get a hold of some aid, whether it's, the drugs we talked about or the gases, and they're going to try to use it not under medical supervision and not knowledgeable about what it is. There was a good case study of a guy that Schaefer did in Outside Magazine, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, who used dexamethasone, and he basically OD'd on it. And he almost died, but he came away from base camp, never even went above base camp. But he did serious damage to his liver and his kidneys. And so there's a dark side to this that people don't really understand the dangers of it if it's used improperly. Yeah. And those are real, right? And I don't know that. So where is Everest going? What do we need? Like, Martin, when you talk to your athletes that are considering climbing Everest, next season, for example, what do you tell them? What do they need to do to prepare? What do you want them to do?
So, I think maybe just one last note about the Xenon, and I've been reading a lot about it, trying to just understand it more and also come into terms with it ethically. It's considered a doping, as is the supplemental oxygen, and I think that's where we can agree on. And so there was a lot of criticism coming from that point, logically so. But we can also then agree that most of the clients or most of the people climbing Everest are not professional athletes or athletes trying to break some official records. And so, they are free to do what they want to. And so I think we can sort of put it in the same bracket. Like, I don't know. I'm not an expert, and it's kind of tricky still. But yeah, just to maybe take the pressure off a bit on the Xenon. And so I agree with you that it's so expensive. I mean, it's one of the rarest gases in atmosphere, so that's, I guess, why it's hard to extract it from the atmosphere, and that will stay expensive. And I think then it also automatically leads to that it will only be for some people who can afford it if they want to then. And that's I guess what we discussed. If you actually want to, if you choose to climb Everest in 5 days and sort of shorten that experience. So for me, I think what my feeling is what will happen is more and more of the hypoxic conditioning, so pre-acclimatization at home. I think that's where it's going. I mean, we in Uphill, we are also helping out with that. We have that option. I am digging into the literature and research like every day, trying to learn more about altitude physiology because it's still so unexplored, and the lack of understanding. And so that's where I see myself. I really would like to be able to monitor the acclimatization process much better, so we can provide that to the people and for them to be safe. Again, it's because everybody is acclimatizing slightly differently. The individual variability in response is huge. So I think that's hopefully we can get better in this, and I think then for the environment it's only better. I hope for the Nepalese community, Sherpa community, it's still good. I guess we can discuss that as well, right? Whether people flying in and out, so they're not hiking or trekking through the valleys, so the people in the villages, they have less business then. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but anyway, but I think still the Everest there's just one Everest. It's the highest mountain on earth, and for myself personally, it's still a big dream of mine. Whether I can make that true one day, I'm not sure, but I can understand why people are motivated to go.
It's a fantastic experience. I mean, there's a lot of critics out there. I often say that Mount Everest is the mountain people love to hate. And I don't know why it brings out the critics like it does, because, you don't see that same venom that comes out about people that, solo sail around the world or swim the English Channel or, do something else that's really tough. But I guess mountaineering has this, this reputation that's mostly defined by Into Thin Air, by Mr. Krakauer, that it's just a bunch of rich jerks, that are paying a lot of money to be drug up to the summit and come home. And I've certainly seen my share of those on the mountains, but the vast majority are just normal people with big dreams and big ambitions, and they feel very grateful to have had the experience, regardless of the result.
Alan, so when you're working with your clients at Summit Coach, what kind of time frame do you want them to be looking at in terms of their preparations? What kind of apprenticeship, if you will, do you want them to go through in their journey towards that ultimate goal?
I'm with Martin as much as possible, 5, 10, 15 years. Just really as long as possible. It's not a get off the couch and just fly to Kathmandu and climb the mountain type of thing. Ideally, a minimum of a year. I tell the story of young Ryan Mitchell. He was 18 years old. He contacted me in December of 22. He's a YouTube sensation. Had made an absurd amount of money doing a Minecraft video on YouTube. And so he said he wanted to get away from that. He wanted to inspire his generation by climbing Mount Everest. I said, great, wonderful goal, love it. And I said, what kind of experience do you have? None. He said, when do you want to climb it? In March. Okay, let's stop. I said, there are companies out there that will take your money, but I will not coach you. He said, well, what will it take? I said, well, it's going to take you agreeing to, it's been at least a year training, getting your body in shape, which was pretty easy for this buff 18-year-old. But I want you to go climb mountains. I want you to get the experience. We're going to work on mental toughness. We're going to work on the holistic approach to how you prepare to go climb this mountain, not just the physical. It's physical and mental and emotional and understanding what you're getting into and having the basic skill set. So he said, yes, sir. And so he went and did, first off, he did the Ecuador volcanoes, and then he did Denali, then Aconcagua with Ed Viesturs of all people. And then he went to Everest with Garrett Madison, and absolutely nailed it. And now in fact, I'm talking to him tomorrow on a podcast because he's leaving in 2 weeks to go to K2. So that's a story where somebody took the advice seriously. Because I've seen other people go, Alan, you don't understand. I don't have the time and money to wait. I'm going to do it now. And I quote this a lot. Sadly, this year, I should have added this in the very beginning, Steve, when you asked me to summarize the season, is that tragically, we had 5 people die on Everest this year, 3 Sherpas and 2 foreigners. Tragic, every one of them. However, in put it in context, I've got data using Himalayan database goes back to 1920s that on average, and the median is around 7 or 8 deaths every year. So it happens. That's the contract you sign on these mountains. But this 5 deaths paled in comparison to the 18 2 years ago, and a little bit with 8 last year. So of those 18 of the 26 were with low-cost operators that said, no experience required. I'll take your money. And this Sherpa that you're going to be with has summited 20 times. So you're in safe hands. If something goes wrong, we'll take care of you. We'll helicopter you off. And there's too many people that buy that value proposition, and because they don't know what they don't know. And that's why, Uphill Athlete and hopefully what I provide is helping people understand what they don't know. Because most people that want to go climb these mountains, my clientele, they typically come from a place where they don't know what they don't know, and they're asking for help to figure that out. Because it's a confusing world out there with all the marketing and the social media and the websites and, slick representation of statistics and everything else.
Yeah. I think it's an annual recurring question. And one of the things that I always encourage people, I think we all agree on, is to just give yourself as much lead time as you can. One of the one of the facts that I share with people is that for an adult, it typically takes roughly 10 years, plus or minus a year, to fully develop your genetic potential as an endurance athlete. That's 10 years, not 10 months, not 10 weeks, not 10 days, 10 years. So, people underestimate themselves at how far they can go and how much they are capable of. I always said I have, and I think it's I could amply demonstrate. I can easily demonstrate that I have no athletic gifts. Scott Johnson used to say that all the time, and it's true. Like, I was in all the sports as a kid. I loved doing all the sports, but I was completely middle of the pack in all of them. The only thing that I had in alpinism was that super long time frame, that way of thinking, like, okay, I'm in this to develop myself over years and decades, not days and weeks, and I just love doing this. And that's what allowed me or enabled me to be able to practice at a high level, was that mindset. And people really don't give themselves enough credit for what they can accomplish if they put in the time and put in the effort. So, Martin, what are you thinking about changing in terms of training or your approach to coaching for, if anything, for Everest 2026?
I don't think I'll be changing so much. Maybe just working with what I've been working out so far. And actually, Alan, it was great to hear actually what the holistic approach you mentioned. Maybe that's something we use in Uphill Athlete as well. Or I talk often about the key performance indicators, the KPI, which gives you an opportunity to kind of break that performance into factors, and then actually, okay, like which factors can I improve, and how, and to what extent. And so then, yeah, physical and the mental, as you mentioned, right? And I think the mental aspect is so important on Everest, and prepare the athletes for the whole thing, the approach, the many weeks of getting to the base camp view, and then once you're there, the waiting game, the uncertainty, and getting sick. What do you do with the adversity, and then with the weather, I was in touch with most of them on Garmin Messenger, so I think it was so important for them to stay in touch with me, to be able to just kind of vent their frustrations or kind of fears as well, anxiety, and just, simple message was like, hey, you're doing fine, just be patient. You have to sit it out, but you'll be fine, just be patient, and you're getting there. I think that was just so simple but so powerful, because you're just not prepared for this kind of scenario when you're sitting up there in the tent, in the windstorm 7,000 meters high, and thinking what's going to happen. But I think maybe what I would like to keep developing is like the monitoring and testing. So, many athletes and also operators, asking me, okay, like how do you prepare the athletes? How do you prepare the clients? Like they want one number, like VO max, for example, right? So has their VO max improved after 2-3 months of training? Like, are they going to be ready? And I had to tell them, hey, like it's the VO max will not tell you the whole story. I'm sorry, it's not that. And I guess if we compare it to marathon running, I guess we can model or get that estimate of the time, the goal time, really well actually with the modeling of the performance and taking the testing VO max and the lactate threshold speed and the running economy. We can get really close to estimating the finish time. Whereas on Everest, I mean, we are not there yet, and so that's where I learned a lot from this season, and I would like to, it's been a couple of weeks now, so work with the data, look back, think, and I think there is a lot of space for improvement there, and of course then sort of include it in the training plans for the next season.
I like the KPIs, the key performance indicators. The one that I like the most, and because training for the new alpinism and the follow-on book that Steve and Scott wrote. My gosh, I call it the a PhD paper on high altitude physiology, but it's great information there. But for me, one of the key indicators is recovery time. And what I suggest to people is that they do, I call it extra credit training, where you go out and do, basically, let's say you do 10 miles and gain 5,000 feet in altitude. Well, do that, come back down to the car, load up on, water and fuel, and then go do it again, same day. And then do like a 20 mile one day, and then do that 20 mile again the next day. And so after each one of those, on a scale of 1 to 10, of 1 is that I'm going to the ER, and 10 is I could do it a third time. So keep a journal of that over a year, and do that maybe once a month. And you have to be totally honest with yourself. It's not for me as your coach or anybody else on this planet. It's only you. And be honest with yourself. If you're a 3, you're a 3. Mark it in. And then look at that trend line. And to your point about the VO2 max, I don't know if it's going to increase or not, but look at how you feel that your recovery is. And if it's not going up, something's wrong with your training.
I agree. It's that famous durability, the sort of new factor in endurance, we call it. So the fourth dimension of endurance performance, we have VO max, lactate threshold, and running economy. And now the durability in especially the long endurance events. And so it's pretty much exactly how you test it. You go up a hill, come down, and you go again, and you compare the two. You can do that quite easily on Training Peaks or the software you're using, and you see the difference, right? Like how it drops, how you maintain it, how the heart rate changes. I agree with that. It's a very good way to measure the capacity. If you can include some altitude, effective altitude, even better. So
I think the secret, though, is that you've got to be objective. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself. I mean, again, that's why I stress that no one else is going to see this number. It is just you. I mean, your trainer, your therapist, your dog, no one else is going to see it. It's just you. And if you're going to cheat, your only person you're cheating is yourself.
Well, that's great wisdom, guys. Alan, how do people find you and find Summit Coach?
Well, they can, first off, they can find me through the Uphill Athlete site. I'm one of your partners, I guess, affiliates, whatever you call me. And a lot of my clients use you guys. I offer physical training, but I tell people, if you want the best out there, go to Uphill. They've got, world-class coaches and nutritionists and physiologists and marriage counselors and everything. So, but they can.
I don't think we've branched out to marriage counseling yet, but maybe we should.
I always joke with people because I ask them also, how does your spouse or partner feel about you going and doing this? And they give me an answer. And I say, hey, listen, just so you know, I offer marriage counseling for a very affordable fee of $10,000. So it's a joke. Which actually, though, I talk to spouses often by people that are on the mountains.
Yeah,
they can find me at my website, alanarnette.com, or go to summitcoach.org. So, yeah, great.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Alan. Thank you so much, Martin. Let's do this again in a year's time and look back and see where we've come.
Sounds good. See if we were smart or dunces.
Well, actually, maybe we should back up. Maybe we should make some predictions. Predictions are always, and then we can. I can torture you with this in 12 months. What is your prediction for trends in 2026, Alan?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot more first ascents of unclimbed mountains in the Himalayas. I know people like Garrett are focusing on that, and also in Pakistan. So commercializing first ascents is, I think, an emerging trend. I think we're also going to see more people on Everest if the Nepal government goes through with this proposal that you have to have a 7,000 meter summit in Nepal. I think they're going to see their business drop by 50%. Yeah. I don't think the permit going from 11,000 to 15,000 is going to have a measurable impact. I think people will figure out how to absorb that. But if you've got to fly to Nepal and you have to get a medical certificate from a government approved authority before you can climb Everest, that's a showstopper. And if you have to climb a 7,000 meters, that takes away mountains like Ama Dablam, Aconcagua, which misses it by 3 or 4 meters, Denali, all Peak Linen, that's Peak Linen is 7,000, but all the usual suspects that people use around the world, Mont Blanc, so yeah, I think they're going to see their business just get devastated if they make it. I love the idea. Let me be very clear. I love the idea of requiring a 7,000 meter mountain before you can go to Everest. On the Chinese side, you've got to have climbed a mountain which is 1,000 meters lower than the mountain you're applying for. And if you're a Chinese national, you have to have summited an 8,000 meter mountain before you can go to Everest. That's the reason that so many people from China come over to the Nepal side where there are no rules. So I applaud Nepal for the 7,000 meter one. Make it worldwide and have a little bit of latitude. Make it 6,500 meters. Don't cut off your nose and spite your face.
I agree. I think it would make sense to include Ama Dablam and Aconcagua. But I think what I want to just mention before we finish, I'm a bit concerned about these new regulations possibly happening in Nepal and compared to China that actually affecting possibly more like the alpinists that look for the first ascents or climbing without oxygen. Basically, the regulations will be that the expeditions will be shorter, if I understood correctly. The base camps will be there only for a couple of weeks and then gone. So you will actually, if you're acclimatizing in a classic way without oxygen, you will just not have enough time. That's what I heard in the media. So I do hope that it doesn't take place and that there is still space for everybody. Also, for climbing without oxygen. And I just wanted to mention that this year. The statistics were quite severe. Only two people succeeded to climb without oxygen. That's pretty. If you see the statistics, what was the total? Do you remember?
Well, since since
Of this year.
of this in total summits.
Total summits.
Yeah. So I have for both sides 846 people.
Wow. Okay.
And so on the Nepal side, it was 257 clients supported by 421 support climbers, Sherpas, Tibetans, others. And on the Tibetan side, roughly 150, something like that. So
I wanted to highlight that because I think it wasn't an easy season for anybody, but without oxygen especially, the windows were so short. And so one of them was a lady called Anya. I actually met her close to Manaslu Summit last year. And so just wanted to congratulate a big
she's
effort.
Fantastic. She's got 12 of the 14 just needs shish and joy, and she'll become the first German female.
I believe she was the 10th woman so far having climbed Everest without supplemental oxygen. So
yeah, she did it. She wasn't quite solo because there were 33 other people that summited on the same day, but she went unsupported, no O's, and just nailed it. She's amazing. One thing about the statistics, though, is that this year on the Nepal side, only 49% of the foreigners who had permits, there were 517 permits issued and 257 summits. That's 49%. Typically on Everest these days, in the last handful of years, it's been in the 60s and 70s. So I think what happened was that we ran into all the stuff we've been talking about for the last hour, is that you had people that lacked the experience. They underestimated how hard it was going to be. They didn't, this is harsh to say, they probably didn't train hard enough, long enough. And once they got up there, especially on those windy days, they just said, I'm turning around. I'm done. And that was probably the right decision. And that helped bring that death total down, even though it's still tragic. But I think there's a lot of good case studies here. I just wish there was more transparency out there about the people that, that have trouble. And I applaud the people that admit it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that forecasts for 2026 are, I heard you guys sidestep the question. You're a very good politician there, because I asked for forecasts and you just started talking about regulations, which brings in a lot of uncertainty, right? But if we look forward to 2026, the big question is, how do the regulations play out? Let's follow up with that in a year from now, and we'll see what went into effect, what didn't, and how that changed the game of climbing Everest in 2026. So thank you, Alan. Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you.
We are not just one, but a community. Together we are Uphill Athlete. Please like, subscribe, and share if you found this episode to your liking, and we will catch you next time. One of the most common questions I get is, how should I get started with training? Well, they say the first step is the hardest, so let's make that easy. We are offering free 4-week samples of our most popular training plans for mountaineering, trail running, climbing, and more. Go to uphill-athlete.com/letsgo to sign up for our newsletter, and you will not only get monthly insights on training for uphill athletes, but you'll also get a sample training plan. It's totally free, so why wait? That's uphill-athlete.com/letsgo.